You're with the Economic Times, and my name is Ashutosh Sinha. Today, it is time to talk about the manufacturing sector. The sector is seeing sweeping changes because companies are going back to their design board and trying to reimagine not just their manufacturing operations, but also the skills and capabilities of the workers, of the people who run them. So, welcome to the Economic Times Leadership Dialogues on Workplace Transformation, presented by Google Workspace. So, let me first explain why it is so critical for businesses of tomorrow and why this topic has to be something that should be of interest to you as a professional in the manufacturing sector. Let me first talk about the words that you'll hear often: reskilling, transformation, digital, technology. All of these words will come back again and again in conversations when you're talking about talking to someone from the sector. Of course, this has to be in addition to others like the safety and well-being of employees. That is a given. So, in the evolving era of digital transformation, workplaces are increasingly, they need to be more and more flexible, collaborative, and connected. But because of the pandemic, it has proved to be the biggest catalyst for transformation in the industry. And of course, it is also giving an opportunity for companies to leap ahead. So there are a whole host of other issues to talk about. Industries have realized that social interaction and collaboration are key aspects for building competencies among their employees. Hence, a workplace transformation program needs to be integrated along with several dimensions for the entire program. Enterprises need to continuously evolve and focus on reskilling and upskilling the workforce. That could be a differentiator for as it goes about its business. So, do employers drive it more than employees? Is technology helping solve the problem, or is it a permanent behavioral shift? There are too many questions that need answers. So let me introduce you to the experts who we'll be talking about over the next 90 minutes. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Rajesh Kumar Tiwari, Vice President Manufacturing, Berger Paints, Mr. Ajoy Lall, Vice President Operations, Commercial Vehicle Business Unit at Tata Motors, Ms. Pallavi Ward, Head of Product Supply Organization India and SAARC at Godrej Consumer Products, Mr. Rajnish Kapur, COO at JK Cement, Mr. Kaustav, Partner at KPMG in India, Mr. Govind Jee Rai, Senior VP HR at HSIL, and Ms. Dragana Beara, APAC Head of Customer Engineering at Google Workspace. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking out the time for this conversation, something very important. But before we move ahead, let me first request Mr. Kaustav Sen, partner of KPMG in India, to set the context for the discussion over the next 90 minutes. Mr. Sen, it's over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ashutosh, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think, as Ashutosh, you mentioned, circa February or March 2020, I think our lives changed completely, and the way we work that underwent a very, very significant transformation, maybe a transformation which we could have never imagined if this had not hit us. So, working across various companies, what we realized is that certain companies could adapt to this transformation a bit easier than the others. The reason being, maybe they were used to it. For example, the sector that I come from, like consulting or professional services or banking, BFSI as we call it, or ITS, they were probably slightly ahead of the curve compared to core old economy sectors like manufacturing, construction, etc., where traditionally the interaction of human and machines that has to be at a particular place, and there is no way to work what we call quote unquote remotely or work from anywhere. So these industries, I think it was quite a bit of a challenge or shock, if you will, for them to adapt. Having said that, across industries, and I will obviously focus a lot more on manufacturing because that's the sector today we are, dealing with. There were basically three pillars wherein, a significant change happened, which completely transformed the way manufacturing companies also had to work, and probably they will continue to work like that in the future. The first was something which we have heard often, which is called cultural transformation, but here the nuances were very, very different. All of a sudden, and let me start with leadership. In manufacturing organization, you were so used to, dealing with people, your teams, large teams, but at a physical location. And a lot of times, work got done by virtue of the commanding presence that a leader has. Now, I think over the last 18, 20 months, all of us have tried, but how do you, replicate that same level of persona over a screen? It's very, very difficult. And in fact, I was just, thinking about it before the start of this panel. All of us were, staring into a screen. Had it been, a physical environment, we would have probably, interacted a lot more, got into a lot many more topics, etc. But that was not possible. Similarly, from the side of the employees, it was again a very, very big change, right? People were so used to, like collaboration is a theme Ashutosh touched upon. We have seen in workplaces, a lot of times collaboration simply happens, by proximity. You need to get some work done, you just walk across to that, workstation or to somebody's desk, and that is, a way of inherently prioritizing certain bottlenecks that you are facing. But in this environment, it was absolutely not possible. Again, in core manufacturing, probably not so relevant because people are still on the workstations. But what about, say engineering or purchasing, which are inherently, or say quality functions where people may not be available, at a close proximity. The second thing that has happened is, the whole digital transformation. Now, we have always been hearing about digital transformation, but the kind of shift that we noticed, be it something as basic as a workflow, wherein again a lot of movement of physical paper, etc., that used to happen, to the extreme example of replacing human workers with bots. Now the trend of automation, etc., were coming up. We were all thinking about, quote unquote bionic organizations or bionic workforce, but the pace of adoption, or the acceleration that we witnessed thanks to COVID, was significantly higher, even in an economy like India, where workforce economics was never a consideration, right? Even today in Indian airports, we see so many security guards, which are probably not there in international airports. But why people today are adopting those kind of automation is simply because that bots don't fall sick or they don't get affected by COVID, but humans do. So that is another major change or transformation that we saw while working with manufacturing companies or old economy companies. The third element was, from the workforce itself. Now, manufacturing traditionally has always competed, I would say, against other quote unquote what we call, slightly more glamorous. Pardon me for using this word, but somebody in an IT industry, etc., is considered to be a little more glamorous than somebody who's working on a shop floor. Now, in the current context, what has happened is that war for talent has even become more intense because people are looking at the flexibility. Like when I'm going to campus today, amongst all the other things, some consideration is that are you still adopting a hybrid working model? How much of flexibility in terms of working hours or location will you provide? Again, in manufacturing context, it is very difficult to do that, but it is important for us to learn to allow or provide that level of flexibility, because otherwise there will be other industries who will be attracting all of those talent. Now all of these summing up together, one is the change in the way we work, but this also brings or raises a certain set of questions which all manufacturing organizations will have to grapple with. And what is the optimal model between this hybrid working vis-a-vis on-site working? What is the most optimal model of interaction? How should your performance measurement parameters for traditional organizations change? How you can still keep employees engaged, motivated, and get the maximum productivity from them? I would be very honest and candid. There are no easy answers. Different organizations are going through this path. Somebody some organizations are doing a complete segmentation of roles and responsibilities, going for more flexible workforce. Others are trying to create a lot of flexibility on the shop floor or on the premises itself, different models. And I think this is what will, set the context for today's discussion. I have a very esteemed, panel and, my colleagues from the industry who can share their own examples. And I think that's what will make this session very engaging and enriching for all of us. So with that, I would hand it over to, Ashutosh once again, to, take this session forward.
Sure. Thanks so much. Very interesting because it is pretty sweeping. Cultural transformation, digital transformation, and workforce transformation. It is like the entire manufacturing operation has to be rethought of, recalibrated of sorts. So let me get the other experts in as well. The first question, and that comes right at the top of my mind, is about the industry that is among the most complex that you'll come across. Automobiles. So, Mr. Lall of Tata Motors, what changes in collaborative approach have you brought about in the plants at Tata Motors as you went on, or as you emerge from the complex situation that emerged last year?
Yeah, thank you, Ashutosh, for the question, and good afternoon, all my esteemed colleagues. So, first of all, we set up a platform called Business Continuity Plan, BCP, and as we say that, and all the senior leaders of the company came to us and joined that platform. The agenda was to, kind of draw up a plan on how different parts of the organization align and integrate to be able to deal with this situation. So we did several things. For example, what is the leadership supposed to do in the current situation? How do we draw from the experiences of our partners elsewhere who have already faced this? For example, we got some learning from JLR at China. So we drew upon that. And then we also looked at our own context on how we could use our own, set of people to deal with this situation. For example, one interesting thing that was done, Ashutosh, was also, as you know, we have something called a self-directed team working on the shop floor. And as Kaustav was mentioning, it's very important for people to be on the shop, especially in manufacturing or operating machines or manning the assembly lines. So there, from among those self-directed teams, which is typically a collection of 15-20 people, from among them voluntarily what came out was a health conscious keeper. Now this conscious keeper actually was the one who volunteered to be the, to make sure that the SOPs for COVID and all, the processes are followed, and if any support is required, he was the one who was the kind of the front end for everybody to be able to align with the new practices and processes. And of course, as Kaustav also mentioned, the digital initiative also took a few steps forward, and we'll talk about that going forward.
Okay. Let me also go across and take a view from the cement industry. Mr. Kapur, how has it changed your perspective, and what are some of those challenges that you're still maybe grappling with? Because as Mr. Sen said, not all answers may have been found already. You're on mute, Mr. Kapur.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think, yeah. So the change in technology, I think, is an ever happening process. It's not something which just, is, one particular event or one particular thing, does that. But what did happen during the COVID times was that the change speed really got accelerated, and it started making us think as leaders as to what we can do differently. Like some of the questions that we grappled, and we are a process industry which has got large number of workforce. So there are areas where people will be required to carry out the job done. So the first question that we asked was, what are the jobs for which your physical presence is actually needed in the plant? And where your presence is not needed, where your physical presence is either to monitor or to read some parameters or look at how the performance is going, all that can be done remotely in a secured manner. Mm-hmm. So where you are physically required to go was something that we started asking ourselves. Mm-hmm. Second question that we started asking ourselves was, what are the papers that really need to move around in the company? Do we really need to move the papers like a typical, old time plants? And although most of our companies have come into an digital transformation with putting in RFIDs and having a paperless delivery kind of a thing, but still imagine about 200-300 trucks entering your plant during your packing times. And if everybody is carrying a piece of paper, that came because everybody suddenly that speed became very fast. The driver started adopting all the digital tools or the things that we gave them on their mobiles or based on RFID. That was the second thing that we did. Third was that despite all this, there are certain very high tech intensive things where you need experts. So could you get the experts through video and such kind of collaborations? And we realized that some of the things for which we would fly in an expert from let's say Germany for addressing a particular issue could now be actually done on remote. So I think these are the few things which came across and we started accelerating. Of course, we were looking at AI and other things. We were looking at video surveillance of our plants. All those things, we suddenly realized that once we had to, reduce the number of people, we started going into it. So I would say that it made the leadership start thinking. It made the people come to you with ideas as to how we can implement that.
Awesome, because there's some of these hardcore operations issues that you have to look at. Mr. Rai, from the people's part of it, what kind of changes have you had to make and ensure that some get done on priority? Can you detail some of that, please? You're on mute, Mr. Rai.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. See, cement industry, glass industry is also a continuous process industry. And the COVID came all of a sudden. The morning, everybody came to know that, in the night, everybody came to know that from tomorrow, everything is going to stop and there will be standstill. But being a continuous process industry, we cannot stop. People have to come, people have to attend job, at least if not in the offices, in the plant. So we could take the advantage of technology. We started connecting over online with the people. But yes, for managing the process, whatever minimum people were required, we could get. We started understanding which are the jobs which can either be stopped on time being basis or which can be postponed for future. And that's how we try to bring down the requirement and operate at optimum level. We also tried to ensure that because the market was not very open, so whatever production cut we can take, we have taken that. But with minimum requirement, we could operate the plant. People were very, very cooperative. We tried to bring everybody on board with collaboration, every day connect online. And then we could manage the operation even during COVID period. So that's how we could manage.
Okay, tough times. Also, the longer term impact would be how people had to be managed and reskilling. We'll talk about that in a little while. Ms. Watt, from the supply chain was the real shocker for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You were managing it across countries. Did you have sleepless nights, and how did you manage, and what fundamental changes have you done?
So I think supply chain, we've been handling this. We had many sleepless nights because we started sometime in November when our Chinese vendors started having problems. Then it moved to some of the European vendors, and then finally it landed in March in India itself, right? And a lot of the vendors obviously got closed down during the lockdown. However, we had one advantage because some of our product lines come under the essential categories, and therefore we were able to help a number of our vendors to start up, right? And similarly, some of those local vendors were also, because they were supplying to essential industries, they were working. So it did help us, and both ways to start up early. In terms of when you look at how we are de-risking now, right? We're looking at obviously we obviously don't have even now. Even before COVID, we did not have a single supplier strategy. Given where we are based, so we are based in the northeast, we are based in Jammu and those kind of remote locations. We've just now doubled down more on that as a de-risking strategy, right? And especially for vendors from what should I say, high risk geographies where we see impacts both in terms of availability and in terms of imports, etc. So we made a concerted plan of ensuring that we have a second or third source on that, and I think that's something which continues. So while COVID has abated, but there are other supply chain problems now, all over the world apart from inflation. So that's just a continuous journey. So I think it's not been sleepless nights. For sometimes it's been for months together that we have had those times.
Okay, so clearly that is a continuous business problem, it
Yes.
would appear. Mr. Tiwari, for the paint industry, the festival season is the biggest one, and the months before that, which is like September, October, and that quarter, those months. This disruption happened a little before that, the shock. What did you have to do to make sure that things were in order, and what fundamental changes are you considering to make sure such a situation does not disrupt again?
Yeah, in fact, we were anticipating that second wave is going to come sooner or later. It came in the anticipated time. So we were actually prepared. We took this opportunity to run the operations in 3 shifts. Usually, paint industry operates either in 1 shift or it's a kind of 2-shift kind of operation. So we got the opportunity, and we have staggered our workforce to maintain a safe distance, because this is a physical work atmosphere in the plant. So we have utilized this opportunity to run the plant in 3 shifts using the same manpower, and that has also given us a good productivity improvement, because in those times, working in proximity, working in filling lines, paint industry, they use a lot of fillings. So working on filling lines in close proximity was a problem, and people were quite apprehensive about it. So we have really staggered the workforce to work in shifts. As far as the depot operations and supply chain is concerned, the same method has been applied there also. We worked 7 days, we worked 3 shifts, staggered our workforce, staggered our supply chain and partners like truck owners, truck drivers, all these people, so that there is no crowd sitting at one place. The second part was, as Mr. Rajnish Kapur has also said, that those supply partners, we have given them some digital tools, so that paperwork and waiting at the gate, on the drivers are waiting at the gate. We have given them some digital tools so that they can transfer their papers, their invoices, their payment slips to the account department directly through a digital medium, and then the exchange of papers and the people coming and waiting at the gate for the approvals has come down, actually. Also our raw material partners, we have collaborated with them. We have collaborated with them for a just-in-time kind of systems in 3 shifts. See, in a legacy system, those important raw materials and important packing material used to come only in general shift, and then if after 5 o'clock people used to go home. This has given us an opportunity to expand our horizons, to work for 7 days, work for the 3 shift operations, and that has really given us the advantage. We also have transformed our workplace, in which the non-required people like supervisors or managers, they start working from their home, and we have utilized IoT technology, Internet of Things, to get all the process parameters and all the quality control parameters sitting at the home. The managers used to get all the informations, and he used to give the judgment. So that has really helped us to maintain the same production level, what was required just before the season. And we have really closed the season with a growth over last year. So it was a good mixed experience actually to us.
Well, quite a learning experience there. Dragana is also here from Google, and she's APAC head of customer engineering at Google Workspace. So Dragana, your sense on how technology can aid workplace transformation, that companies have the opportunity, because this probably is a once in a lifetime opportunity to change and use technology to leap ahead.
Wow, that's a big question. We need like 3 hours for this answer, but I'm gonna try and shorten that. I think that this is not a once in a lifetime, frankly speaking. I think it's an opportunity for us to evolve how we work. And you know, word transformation means going from state A to state B, but really I think we're going to be evolving as technologies emerge and as people embrace different styles of working. And of course, to all the earlier points that were made, you know, there's definitely, it's not just technology, there's a lot to do with culture and process. Because if in the past, especially here in Asia, when I moved here 6 years ago, I was told that, you know, the culture here is that you need to have face time. Like that's how your commitment to the company is measured. Are you at the office before your boss? Are you there after they leave? And that person that was doing that didn't necessarily have to have a huge output. They could just, you know, spend their time with the right people and be perceived as very dedicated. Now, actually, this is giving us an opportunity to put a completely different KPIs in place. And of course, we have different personas in a workplace. We have the knowledge workers, which I believe were addressed through the references to operations and managers. And then we have frontline workers, people who actually have to be in the plant, those who have to actually be at the place of work. So the question is, how do we help all of them transition and evolve? And so when I started my career, and it was a long time ago, in 1996, I had an opportunity to tour the GM Lake Orion car manufacturing plant. And back then at that time, that plant maybe had 15 people in it. There's all robots, mostly electricians waiting for the robots to break, some unskilled labor, and also some engineers kind of waiting for electricians not to be able to get their work done. And so I believe that we have that type of, you know, sophistication and automation to a part where you see in China, a lot of people actually have everything handmade because the labor is cheap. So the investment into these two different types of manufacturing processes are quite different. And so it's really important to look at your own environment and decide like what makes sense, because we have actually gone to some of our customers in India who are manufacturing organizations and talk to them about our frontline solutions, where the frontline workers will be equipped with mobile devices that allow them to communicate and collaborate, not just amongst themselves and with machinery around them, but also with the back office and knowledge workers in their organization. And then we were told that actually the cost was too prohibitive, even though actually, if you look at the user charges, and what considerations that company is making. Like, does it make sense to calculate your ROI and actually equip your frontline worker with those tools so that they can actually move from pen and paper and not only become productive themselves, but also when you move things to a device, that device will capture a lot more data than the data that happens during the work process. This device will capture location, will capture specific interaction with the machine or application. And all of the data can be siphoned back and actually analyzed from the CFO and COO point of view to look at what organizations are being more effective than others, and perhaps look into what is making them more effective, and then do some best practice sharing at the very basic level, right? At another level, they can also find ways to streamline operations and make them a lot more effective. But again, there is a specific level of investment that perhaps it doesn't exist in some of the industries. On the knowledge worker side, that seems to be an easier justification, and there's definitely been a lot of progress with respect to. I mean, right now I'm sitting in Singapore in my home office. You're all, mostly in your home offices probably, and we are having a very productive conversation. It's not as fun as it would be if we were in person, but fundamentally we're getting the work done. So there's definitely that element of how do we enhance and bridge that experience of digital versus physical. So smart spaces will come in play and help us do that. And there'll be a lot more IoT sensors all around us, not just in manufacturing plants, but also in offices, meeting rooms, where perhaps we'll have large displays to help virtual members of that meeting appear and feature more prominently in the room where there's perhaps 2 or 3 people in person. We will also have an ability maybe to have a room take notes for us and distribute them to everyone. We'll have an opportunity for room to make sure that we're safely distanced from each other. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. The question is, what is the appetite for investment, for risk? What is the vision behind it? And how do we justify that? So opportunities are endless. It's just, what makes sense for whom will be very unique to each organization themselves.
Sure. So, Mr. Kapur, what Dragana is also talking about is that mobile device, and some of the things that you've done, which you mentioned that each person was using a mobile device instead of papers, the 300 trucks that you spoke of. So, is that somewhat the future of working and collaborating together, where you are driven by data being captured by a variety of mobile devices?
Absolutely. I think that is the way forward. And what is happening is that we were all, by sudden event happening, which does not happen. So normally forced to start thinking as to how we can do our work in a better way. What can we do? And, necessity is the mother of invention. And you give a problem, and this, I think our human race is capable of finding a solution. We all dig in and we find various solutions. So there are actually a couple of aspects, and on the positive side, while, the environment in terms of, imagine an uneducated truck driver coming to your plant, or a person who's bringing your raw material in a truck to drop it in your plant premises, they start realizing and start getting benefit of it, because they will only do it. The first thing, initially they would feel is that you are putting a GPS device in his vehicle, you're going to monitor his movement, and you're not going to allow him to do some of the things which we, won't like logistics supply chain model. But today, with these kind of things happening, suddenly there was a buy-in from all stakeholders. But I was just wondering, when Dragana was saying about, meetings and ease of meetings, and some of the other things which have started happening, and now because we are almost coming close to 2 years, maybe 3 months short or shy of it, of sitting at home and meeting people, meetings have become easier. You need to send an invite. I don't need to wait for somebody from Singapore to come to my office to meet me. So meetings have started happening more. It is easy to invite people, so more number of people have started coming for meetings.
And we have more.
Yeah.
If you notice that people are getting burnt out because
they're getting burnt out, and we are unnecessarily calling everybody. And since everybody can come, people are. We have become masters at multitasking, not just at multitasking in what we are doing, maybe taking 2-3 meetings at time. So earlier, we used to say that you are physically present, but mentally not present. Now what I realized is that you are digitally present and physically not even in your chair. So the value of human interaction is immense. Today, if we would have met physically, we would have made some bonds. And before we started today's session, all of us were sitting quietly and waiting for 4 o'clock for the meeting to start. So I want us to be a little conscious of that part also. And, so what we have started doing off late is we started having a mix of physical as well as digital. So people who can be in one room, they are in one room. And people who are, remote, they join from remote. The advantages are that all the morning review meetings that I used to take with all my plants and all my sales force, I take it in my car now. So I'm able to use my time well. So I think going forward, it is going to be a hybrid model, which Kaustav was also mentioning. People have started expecting a hybrid model. So if my EA comes and tells me I am going to Himachal Pradesh, I have got some, medical problem in my family, I'll work from home for 7 days. And being an ex-army man, being very rigid by rules, earlier probably I would have told him that, no, what are you talking? You will take leave and go. Now I tell him, okay, you go and work from there. So I think it's a mix as far as our meeting spaces are concerned.
So, Mr. Sen, then, where does this, the point that Mr. Kapur made about this eating into, works both ways. Sometimes it's a problem, sometimes it's the opportunity that we spoke about. How do companies ride this opportunity and make sure that it raises the bar and also helps them leap ahead?
So I think, in my experience of, consulting again with companies, different sectors, etc. Fundamentally, I think, change is the toughest when you have options, because the business case that you have to establish, because at the end of the day, we as humans will only subscribe to a particular change once we have, quote unquote, I'm using a consulting term, but if you feel it, the business case. And business case doesn't always necessarily mean in terms of money or economics or PNL, but there is a subjective element also. So I think COVID has done that. It has shortened or made the business case question redundant, because if you do not change, then your survival is at stake. It's a bit like Squid Game, right? If you don't play the game, you anyways die. So and that, I think, again, Mr. Kapur also mentioned, it has also created a lot of innovations, which I think Dragana was also mentioning. So those two things are available, I think, as tools today for us. How we use it, I think that is the essential question, because fundamentally, if you ask me, and I've been asked this question multiple times, so will it be 100% virtual, or will we become physical, etc.? I think the answer again lies somewhere in between, because a certain element of business activities cannot be done without physical interaction, because business on an ongoing basis again needs two things. One is, a lot of lessons learned, etc., come from observation, and that observation, and a lot of it is also through non-verbal cues. It is very, very difficult, almost impossible to get it done through a digital medium. And second thing is, you can only convince others to do things for you, which is essentially how a business runs, right? Because there are no set patterns, or otherwise bots would have replaced all of us, right? That is not happening. So you can only convince or influence others to do something that you want to do by virtue of creating bonds. So those bonds will also have to be done physically. But at the same point in time, I think the level of productivity and efficiency that virtual working is bringing in. In fact, I can share one example. I see Mr. Lall sitting there. He had been my client, several years back. And every week from Bombay, I was in Jamshedpur trying to, interact with him and physically meeting him. If this was in the pandemic scenario, maybe I would have chosen to go once a week and spent, the rest of the 3 weeks interacting like the way we are doing, which would have, immensely improved productivity, and also probably would have been a little less expensive for his organization, because there is also a cost involved. Not great for hospitality or airline from a overall service economy perspective, but as such, this is becoming more productive. So to summarize and cut a long story short, what we are seeing and what we are also advising clients is, be open to the change, because there is a lot of resistance also, that things can't be done this way, can't be done that way, what I think Dragana was also mentioning, because as Indians, psychology wise, we are of the feeling that somebody needs to watch our back, or somebody needs to peep over our shoulders to make sure we work. I think that concept has been completely blown apart, because, and I think, forget the stock market, but the company performances are a very clear indicator that that's not the case. So with that principle in mind and being open to change, I think we should learn to imbibe what is in the best interest. And I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle. I know it's a very typical consulting answer, but that's probably the reality.
Yeah, interesting. And because Dragana also referred to that in her opening remark, where she spoke about culture and processes and the belief that it required face time. But now things are different. And that's what people are trying to get used to. Mr. Lal, so the challenge then, or rather the issue that I'd like to understand from you is, how can leaders, and you run several manufacturing plants, how can they ensure that teams are empowered to adapt to the new ways of working? And how can their technology aid that working ways of working?
That's right. I think empowerment is the key. And how this empowerment is also being enabled by digital is your question, perhaps, Ashutosh. So, so by the way, alongside COVID or even before COVID, what was happening?
Your audio is a little muted. Maybe you may want to just speak up a little bit.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, please.
Okay, so what I was saying is that, alongside COVID, what was also happening was, Industry 4.0. In fact, that started sometime before. And what really helped us prepare for COVID was also acceleration of this Industry 4.0. And why I'm talking about Industry 4.0 is, a lot of empowerment comes to the working level also by use of Industry 4.0. What actually happens suddenly is that, perhaps Dragana was also talking about that, we have 4-layer data structure. The first layer is really, putting sensors on all the machines which are working on the shop floor. So you exactly know 24/7 that what exactly is happening when it is running and it is not running, how optimally it is running and things like that. Second layer is, really connecting it through internet so that all the data can interact with each other. Third is all the data is stored in data lake. And fourth is really to get a MIS or an insight from all this data. Right now, since this data is now kind of democratized and available to all, the person at the shop floor is looking at the same data as anybody else in the organization, and therefore, there is a sense of empowerment that everybody is going to see the same thing. Everybody is going to derive at an insight based on this data, right? So that is one part. This is on the digital side. And what actually happened also on the human side, as I was mentioning to you in my opening remarks as well, that we in the shop floor, and Kaustav knows about it, are organized not typically in a hierarchical structure, but we have self-directed teams. And those self-directed teams of workmen, who are really the people working on the shop floor, they are actually empowered to take all the routine decisions. Nobody tells them that you go and work on this machine, or if you have to, for example, that group of 10 to 12 people, they decide that today, given this kind of an absenteeism for the day, given this kind of production requirement for the day, they decide amongst themselves on how to man, the stations. They will also discuss among themselves on what are the key quality issues that they need to be cautioned about, what are the new changes which have happened in the product, and things like that. What are the safety incidents which may have happened yesterday, and therefore, what are the learnings and what do we need to do? And those teams, and if the quality is bad, they are empowered to stop the line, stop their machine, and call for the supervisors. So that kind of empowerment also has got enhanced, and through digital, they are actually able to, do it also in a more systematic and structured way. And in my view, unless we are able to kind of unleash the potential of people working on the front line through digital, this is something which is not going to happen. And therefore, your question is very right. And in my view, empowerment is the key, and we are really working on that.
Okay, just to remind everyone that in case you want your questions to be addressed or to be asked, you please feel free to put them on the chat, and we will try and take it to the experts here, because this is something very serious, and we're talking of a lot of two important things that you'd like to know more about, and their experience is very important. Their experiences of handling a situation like we've seen in the last a little over 18 months, that also we're talking about, and how it is changing the entire manufacturing sector. So, Dragana, I'd like to come back to you. The challenges faced by manufacturing companies, and in making sure that internal teams can collaborate, internal teams can work together. How does tech help raise the bar for such teams in the manufacturing space, and now that there is an opportunity which we spoke about earlier?
I mean, some of the points already raised along the lines of bringing experts remotely. And actually, one of the interesting things that we offer these days is Google Glass integrated with Google Meet. So the person who is perhaps on site and needs to troubleshoot something or needs support, or they can actually call an expert with the Google Glass and have that expert watch through their eyes what is going on in front of them, and offer real-time support and step-by-step instruction of what that person needs to do that's right on the front line. That's one of the more innovative ways of getting that remote support in real time right then and there. There are many ways that, depending whether you are talking about communication on the shop floor within the employees there or with the back office, every one of those functions has some of their workflows that can either be automated, and there are many platforms right now. We have one, it's called AppSheet, where you can actually use, it's a no-code application development workflow streamlining tool that anyone can actually create an app, mobile app, and actually streamline some of the processes, and basically offer a very easy way of people cutting out steps that perhaps they had to do manually before with pen and paper. Because there's a study done last year that says that 80% of US manufacturers, and US is considered, I guess, one of the more automated industries, there 80% of the frontliners in the US use pen and paper. And McKinsey was saying that if you start automating, putting communication and collaboration tools into that type of environment, you can actually lead to savings of almost $100 billion across the world, because there's going to be 20 to 30% productivity savings and increase. And there's an interesting report. If you just Google manufacturing communication and collaboration, you can get to that. So there is a lot of interesting data out there that points the fact that if you choose the right organization, like department, if you choose the right workflow and you start that way, it doesn't have to be a big bang. It doesn't have to be all done at once, but the goal is to actually start introducing also that technology within even those less like more blue collar workers that may not have the education or perhaps tech savvy. The nice thing is that a lot of people by now are using mobile phones. I think globally there's something like close to $9 billion mobile phones being used, and we have less population than that. So almost everyone, I remember being in Africa and seeing Maasai warriors having a mobile phone back in 2005. So I think a lot of people have mobile phones. The question is what sophistication of mobile phone. And people are prone to using it. And then, of course, in our case, Google Workspace, like Gmail, is used by 3,000 users globally. So people are accustomed to this in their personal lives. So it's not such a big barrier for them to actually adopt it at work and may actually welcome it. A lot of, in that previous survey that I stated, workers that have been asked about their interest in having technology on the factory floor were all for it. And as a matter of fact, indicated that they would prefer an employer that had that level of automation. And now with the, I don't know if you've been following, but in North America, they call it the big exit year, where there's never been more jobs open. And most of those jobs are actually low skill jobs. So the fact that an employer is going to offer somebody modern technology, something that's going to make them more productive and cut out some of the routine basic things that waste time and give them a chance to really apply themselves, will make that employer more attractive. So really now we're bridging into this whole talent wars and the acquisition of the best talent and retention of the best talent, because even having high churn costs a lot of money, as you'll probably know. So that is all the technology can help, not just in terms of giving individual productivity or giving even a specific department and organization, but also giving a whole company a whole new approach to what their future is going to look like as they move along that digital transformation journey.
Okay, Mr. Rai, from the HR lens, if I were to ask, how does the collaborative approach help the person to be more productive? So in your case, as an HR leader over the last 12 months, what have been the learnings, and if you can share some insight into how you've gone about it?
Yeah. So, see, one is that the technology with the onset of COVID, the technology which has been available in the market, that has definitely helped people to connect and collaborate online. That has really helped, that everybody has used, and even we as a manufacturing company, we used, and we have taken advantage to the fullest extent. But our situation was a little different. The people were supposed to be there, are required to be there in the plant. So how do we keep them motivated that they come every day in spite of lockdown? People are not traveling, transport is not available, but they have to come to work, they have to perform their job, maybe at a skeleton level, but people were expected to come. So what we did, we made sure that at senior level, at least 1 or 2 people are available in the plant every day, which was really motivating all the people to be there in the plant. And he was available, or that particular person was available, that for any kind of need, any kind of assistance, any kind of clarity, that person is there. Even if any issues are there, if he has to take with somebody, but he checks and gets them the resolution. People at soft floor were empowered to take decision on their own. Even if there is a mistake, it was not questioned. So that's how we made people to get motivated, act on their own, and see that things are getting performed. Also, we took a decision that if anybody gets infected, because they are coming to office, if anybody get infected, their treatment, their well-being will be taken care by the company till somebody is on leave because of COVID, that will be paid by company. So all these welfare measures were also put in place so that people are not afraid that they have to attend office or factory during the COVID period. So that's how we could manage. And later, definitely we have gone for 100% vaccination on company account for all the employees. So that's how we could manage to run the show.
Ms. Bhatt, from across different geographies, and I come back to that because that would have made the job, as you mentioned, not just sleepless nights, maybe months. What were some of those fundamental changes that you did that could help you work smarter and maybe look ahead at the opportunity as well? You're on mute, Ms. Bhatt.
Yeah, so we had this challenge of, like I said, multiple factories all over India, and at that point of time, I mean, the first wave of COVID, our issues were more related to getting factories started again, etc. Right, and since our factories, unlike the gentleman here, our factories are much smaller and they don't have that kind of scale, right? And therefore, if I compare myself obviously to automobile industry or process industries, level of automation is lower, right? So first, our first issue was more related to safety, because in the previous environment, it was very difficult to work and maintain physical distance. Right. So I think the first changes that we had to do was on our packing lines to ensure that we manage for safety, we manage for physical distancing of our workmen. So that's I think the first change we had to do, and that's something that obviously that now we are looking at for the future also, because the business case for automation is very different now, right? The business case for automation, even in some plants where it did not make sense from a commercial viewpoint, right, earlier, is entirely different, right? So there are many examples like that. Similarly, like one of the gentlemen was talking about, when we're talking about stores management, we're talking about transport management, right? So that's how do we work on a 24-hour basis there also, so that we spread across the load on these people, right? So that's something that we are looking at, right? And that we've already worked on. Low cost automation across all our factories. That's the work we are doing. Also, I think from a collaborative space. So, for example, earlier, let's say, a digital twin would not have been so necessary for us, right? But in a lockdown situation where our R&D people cannot visit our factories, right? So the factory people have to take up jobs which are not only related to operations or productions, but they are practically also simultaneously working on looking at the quality aspects, looking at, not even pilot plant stage, but even a stage before, right? Because they now have to work, almost take up half of the job that a R&D person would come and do in the factory. So those are the areas where we think technology will help, and we're looking at solutions which would help us do that, so that in the future, that collaboration that used to happen by physically people moving to factories can be done now remotely. Okay, so that's the kind of movement that we are doing.
Sure. Mr. Tiwari, what are some of the challenges that you are facing and you think that could help you scale up from here? Because as you mentioned, things are looking good and you've done better than last year. You're on mute, Mr. Tiwari.
Of course, some of the challenges which we have faced during this pandemic season is supplies of raw materials. We had workforce ready to work, but there was supply interruptions. Also since dispatches were also interrupted because of the non-availability of the trucks, or some states are shut down, some regulations, some roads are closed. So we forced to think about an alternate strategy to maintain our stocks in the factories. Earlier, we used to maintain most of the stocks in our regional distribution centers, depots, and at the customer's end. So that has given a thought to relook our strategy about maintaining good stocks in the factories, and then we thought of to establish automatic retrieval and storage systems. Those are automated robotic kind of application where FIFO is also being followed. So earlier we had manual systems where first in first out was very difficult to introduce, but the technology has given us, and the COVID time has given us an opportunity to set up new technology which will automatically retrieve the material from the godown, and it will follow the first in first out principle. So that has given us a really good advantage. Also, on raw material front, we also thought of having just-in-time kind of a system. So we approached our raw material suppliers to set up a raw material warehouse near our factories. Earlier we used to get trucks, and line of trucks used to be staying outside the factories. So that has also given us an opportunity to think about the strategy, and because of less disruptions in supplies and less disruptions in the outgoing dispatches, our factories are able to produce more. Because earlier in those cases, we were not able to produce because dispatches are not happening. Right. So now we can maintain some safe stocks inside the factory, and that has given us really a good improvement in terms of maintaining stocks for peak seasons or peak demand seasons, or whenever market demand goes up. So that has really helped us.
Okay, Kaustav, I would like to come to you, and I understand you have to leave for something very urgent. So just one short question. What should be the building blocks for a tech-driven approach to manufacturing in the future? I know, again, it's a pretty broad question, but if you can probably give some pointers that could be of use for people who are watching and somebody who would like to consider them.
Ashutosh, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a very large, broad question. In fact, we grapple, but I will, touch upon, by no means comprehensive, but, the few critical ones. First of all, I think it is very, very important to not see tech in isolation, but completely link it to, the business outputs and the KPIs. Because again, typically, I have seen this always as a problem. Business is seen as, kind of a little bit complementary to tech, and there is, always this belief which one should come first, tech or business. The answer is neither. Tech is, the building block which will help you achieve, business KPIs and business process transformation. That is number one. Second is, I think, the mindset, what we call, the digital or technology dexterity. Again, and this is more of a cultural change, but very, very important in an organization context. People think I am either a non-technology person or I am a technology person. It's never like that. All of us are business leaders. For example, I do not really understand how Google builds Google Glass, but I understand, what is the kind of business value proposition that a Google Glass can today offer me, be it, in terms of remote inspection, or as, Dragana mentioned, I have personally used that as virtual, walkthroughs, etc. That level of, openness and that level of digital dexterity, understanding that has to be there within the organization, and this has to be a very focused reskilling effort. And I'm not obviously talking about, the top leadership people who are present, in this panel, but people who are, say, at the middle management at the execution level. So this kind of, change transformation is very, very essential. And third, I think, and this is probably a challenge as well as an opportunity, is, and this is, I'm speaking more from an Indian context, how can we have, I won't say low cost tech, but very effective, technology which is very effective towards, business efficiency, profitability, so that cost still doesn't become a prohibitive factor, for the transformation. So those will be the 3 points, Ashutosh, which I will make.
Okay, I won't hold you back, Kaustav. As I said, I understand you have to.
Yeah, I have a client meeting, so very sorry about this, but a pleasure, being here.
Thank you so much for being with us, and we'd love to have you again and hear about some of your insights as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaustav.
Bye.
And we'll catch up again.
Bye.
So, Dragana, if I can now get you, I love the term that Kaustav used, and he talked about technology or technological dexterity. Is that so easy? Because again, you refer to the culture part of it. If you can just make a comment about that.
So there's the culture piece, which I think facilitates people's openness to immerse themselves and learn and be curious and open-minded. Because one of my colleagues runs our Art of the Possible or Design Thinking workshop, and he starts by showing a picture of a train station where he used to meet his girlfriend back in the 90s, and nobody's using a phone. And then he shows something from like now, and everyone is on the phone. And he says, we say people have a hard time changing, but he said, look, all of this happened in less than 20 years. So if the tools are easy to use, if the tools have value to the user, people will adjust. It's not going to be, such a huge barrier. As I mentioned, I've seen Maasai warriors in Serengeti use mobile phones back in 2005. And the fact that, they saw value to be able to communicate with others is remarkable, because those places have zero even electricity and running water, but they still have mobile technology. So if we provide our workforce with an opportunity to cut down on tedious things, on giving them more flexibility. Actually, just today I saw a LinkedIn poll where they were asking people, would they prefer to go back to the office? Would they prefer to be at home 50-50? Or would they like to be the ones deciding when they go in? Overwhelming amount of responses in tens of thousands was, I would prefer to decide on my own. So giving people some of that ownership and authority usually actually gets things positive response, because people like to be trusted. People like to also be empowered, and people like to make an impact. So culture facilitates recognition around that. Culture facilitates also management mindset around that, because it's definitely the management styles have to change. the conversation styles have to change, the trust levels have to change. And of course, in different organizations, that will be less easy or more easy depending on what their current culture is like. But like I said, depending on the organization themselves, they need to decide what they want to be when they grow up, and they need to decide how they want to get there. But there's many avenues, and I also think that technology is probably one of the easiest pieces. I think that process and culture is probably the more challenging one, as I've seen in many different customer conversations as well.
Okay. Mr. Lall, here's a tough one. Probably, I am guessing this is a tougher question than what others, or tougher questions to answer more than asking is the easier part for me. But as you look across different Tata Group companies, such a huge conglomerate, what are some of those challenges? Can you identify some areas where what makes it possible for some companies to adapt to change and some companies to be more resistant to change? Or even if across industry, if you look at, what are some of those critical factors? Is technology one of them? Is access to finance or something like that?
Yeah, Ashutosh, but we had a deal that you'll ask me only easy questions. All right.
Okay, let me try. If you can answer the tougher question, please.
Sure. So I think, so let me relate it to what, perhaps Kaustav mentioned or Dragana mentioned. One of the way on how we have kind of scaled it is we had two options, either to get data scientists from outside, or we train our domain experts on the data science. Now, to adapt to this change that we are mentioning, both options are available, and many companies do, either of them. But what we chose was, it was very difficult. So we in our workforce there are experts. We have really worked for a number of years, and they know the system quite well. They know what processes they manage. And therefore, we thought that it would be easier for them to go through this digital champions program. So we tied up with somebody locally called C4I4, if you know that, and they went through a rigorous 1-year program, which included 2 action learning projects, and therefore these domain experts were able to adopt digital and bring it to the shop floor. Now these 50 champions that have got created in batch 1, and we are having subsequent batches now they are kind of apostles for this change. Right, so companies find different ways of adapting to the change through people. In fact, people will have to kind of be the torch bearers, and will have to adopt this, right? So that's how we are doing. So I think the main thing is that, as you're saying, that why some of the companies are able to do it better than the others. In my view, it is all about alignment. Once we are clear about the superordinate goal, once you are clear about how the world is moving and how the competition is moving, things become easier across the cross-section of employees. And then you find a way which is more acceptable to the people, where people also see their growth and how their relevance goes up in the current context. The example of digital champions that I just talked about, I think then this generates another level of energy in this organization to adapt to newer things. I think that would be my take on, how to go about doing it from a cultural point of view. Hope that kind of answers this very, very tough question.
Mr. Kapur, your point of view as well, because again, just like the Tatas, even your group, in your company also, there are many group companies, different businesses. So from your perch, what are some of the differentiators between the leaders as they look ahead with manufacturing, and what are some of those steps that they are taking? Mr. Kapur, you're again on mute.
I think I would like to put it very, very bluntly. If you are a business leader, you're going to embrace the change which a business leader should take. If you are an industry leader, you will go for that change. So for any change to make sense to you as an industry and to you as a leader, it must add value. There was a necessity when COVID, made it imperative that we don't come in physical contact with each other. So we responded to that. But in any case, this digital drive was going on. Industry 4.0, people were talking. AI is coming in. All those things are happening in the workplace. So if you look at things from that perspective, that you need to move forward, the way technology is moving, the way businesses are moving, you have to do it. And to do it, as very rightly pointed out earlier, the culture has to be created. So you need to make sure, without creating that kind of an environment in your organization where people start trusting in moving forward, where you start providing enabling, technology, as Dragana was saying, technology is the easy thing that can be done. You can go out and, give an outlay of a capital that you're going to allocate for that on resources. Capital allocation, while it is the most expensive, is also the easiest. It is the human time allocation and the creating the synergy, making people understand what you can do. So I think in our company, what we have done is, and also it is not, it's not a digital switch on or switch off. It will move forward. So you keep moving forward. So you start doing some things which you can immediately do. And when you start doing something immediately, you see what is easy to do and what gives maximum value to do. And I think we have embraced a mix of these things. Where I get maximum value, I drive. Where it is easy to change, I do it. Where it gives some comfort to my people, I do that first. Because then they feel that, okay, this is something which is making my life easier. So if today my people, my boys can work from their home, the girls can work from their home, and still deliver and still be recognized for the good work they are doing, then when we start talking, okay, now we want to move forward and into something else in the way we are doing things, the adaptation happens. So I think as a leader, most important thing that we need to do in our organizations is to identify this is the change which is going to make a difference, and then create an environment around it. I think it's not very difficult. If you are a leader, you have to do it.
Yes, it's a leader who drives the culture. Absolutely pointed. Said, Mr. Kapur. Ms. Wad, from your point of view again, one of the issues that and again, this also relates to people very much. One of the issues is the way platforms are used, the company platform, and the team members. They're working from home today. They're using personal devices. Sometimes third-party free apps that might be potentially unsecure. In a situation like today, how does the organization, how should they be handling it? And is ban, if I'm using the word ban, a solution?
Sorry, I didn't get the last part. Ban a solution.
Ban. Some organizations just don't allow free apps or some of those kind of solutions. Is that an option?
Well, I think everybody uses their own device nowadays, and that's very difficult thing to do. So I think what the IT team does is basically make a sandbox for where the work apps are, and so I think that's how you try to manage security. And I think the stance nowadays is obviously from the IT perspective is. Trust no one or trust no device or anything. So I think that's the stance that the IT architecture takes. I think it's as simple as that, and all processes are built towards that. So if you are using if I'm using my phone, obviously, if it's the work email or something, there's only so much I can do. I can't download stuff on my phone unless it's again on, let's say, a communal drive, which the IT team manages, right? So people are free to use their own devices, and they will, right? And it's something which is very difficult to police. But I think the default mode is to trust nothing and build the IT architecture towards that. Whether it's our own device or whether it's our IT OT what should I say, infrastructure in our factories. I think everything is handled that way.
Okay. Also, one point I wanted to understand from you, Mr. Kapur, and I'd like to come to Dragana after that. Mr. Kapur, the question of the building blocks for that transformation. You spoke about the culture. Again, it's one part, it's the thought, it's the beginning maybe where the leader will point. But you still need to have the building blocks for that transformation ready. What would you say should be the first steps for those building blocks?
That's a difficult one, I think so. Yeah. there are multiple building blocks. So I think you need to work on increasing the capability of your people. Like we were talking of, you have a tech mindset or tech skills or things like that. So many things can be easily done. So are we orientating our workforce, our young engineers, our boys who come, who are working? How do we enable them? How do we train them as to what needs to be? Then I think the second building block is that the leadership team, does it know? So only when you know what is the capability of what you want to do, or what are the pitfalls, like, security and data security is one of the most important things. And I think we have encountered in the last couple of years times when our data has been breached and ransomware and we have built up our firewalls and security around that. Because imagine you are having 300 depots across in the country, and you're selling cement across these depots, and your data coming in and coming out. So I think the first building block, as you in your question asked, I think the first thing is the thought is there that you want to move forward. Second is that you start equipping your people in terms of their skills, in terms of their mindset. You start talking of it. Then I think the other thing is very rightly pointed out. There is nothing as IT and business. These are both combined. And in a typical way, I would say that the digital tools are force multipliers, if we may call so, or the performance multipliers to take your performance in a multiplicative factor or in an exponential factor. So manually you may do things and move forward X distance. Here you may move X square, X cube, or whatever. So we need to understand that, and then we need to move. And my last bit would be that in the building blocks, don't get too ambitious in the beginning. Have your roadmap. You may, for a thing that you may take 5 years, it's, I think, difficult to start dreaming to do it in 5 days. So make a roadmap and measure your progress against it. Have a strategy in place. And then I think, like in our company, we are doing a lot of things in that manner. Just to tell that, in terms of automation, we first automated all our movement of our vehicles inside by bringing in RFID-based systems. Then we said, okay, all the quality documentation, whatever testing takes place should hit the central server, and centrally we'll be able to. So that we have done. So now we are slowly moving forward and trying to understand in our kiln where there are multiple thousands and hundreds of, data points. How do we bring them at a central place and start monitoring them? How do I give that input on the mobile of my shop floor manager so that sitting at home, he can see what is going right, what is going wrong? So I think
absolutely get the drift. Get the drift what you're speaking, and I can just so much see the the former defense officer in you driving that. I can almost feel that as you were speaking. Dragana, I'd like to come to you then. Something very related. How is Google or some of Google's technologies enabling customers to collaborate better for their workplace, and how should organizations approach this kind of a program and the outlook that they will have for executing it?
Yeah, so I already spoke quite a bit about Google Workspace being one of our primary collaboration communication platforms that we use. Actually, Google Workspace is something that Google built for itself. So, looking at the speed at which Google moves, our real-time collaboration through Docs and Drive and basically sharing of everything is essential to what we accomplish as a team. I spent 20 plus years in other environments. And so last year when I moved to Google, it was the first time I actually got to use this tool. And I was quite impressed with what I was able to accomplish. And I mean, we can edit documents together. We can edit documents on our own. We can even change our presentation to like a minute. Even during the meeting, sometimes people will go in and change content that they want to talk about before their turn, and they just refresh the presentation. It's right all there. So there are many, many ways in which we collaborate and communicate, and we're continuously enhancing that. We are making sure that the user experience across different platforms is the same, because we recognize that not everyone is going to sit in front of a laptop all the time. So we have functionality on mobile devices. We have Android devices, we have Chromebooks. So there's that integrated end-to-end consideration, both for user experience, the security, collaboration, sharing, and also integration with other tools. Because what's really, really important is to look at other digital transformation platforms, especially manufacturing, the whole factory, smart factory, factory 4.0, whatever different groups call it. They address the process and they address the automation, but human factor is still very important. So putting Google Workspace as a connector of the human element into that environment becomes really like a key ingredient, and allowing people to work together with the system and with the platform becomes really important. So those are all things that we are looking at to take to market to our manufacturing customers. But like I said, we are the biggest user of our own tools, and we always experiment on ourselves first. We have had, again, I think that technology also comes with some of that Google culture. Google culture tends to be very collaborative, very trusting. We talk a lot about psychological safety within teams and ability. We don't have very large hierarchical barriers. Like, for example, when I joined Google, literally 2 days after I joined, I was watching our TGIF address, which is when Sundar Pichal and everybody from the executive team updates the organization at once a month. And one of our VPs of HR was talking about our flexible work and return to work, and some of the questions that he still wasn't clear on how he was going to approach. I moved over from another company that piloted flexible work for 10 years prior to COVID. So I felt empowered to just email him, and I did. I sent him a big email sharing what happened in my previous workplace, how they leveraged that. And he emailed me right next day. We had a conversation, and that really did impact some of the things that have happened in the organization. And I was just a new person, 2 days in, but the fact that I felt empowered to contact a senior executive in the US that I've never met, and that person actually wrote right back and engaged a whole team on discussion on this topic was really amazing and encouraging. And so we do believe that diverse viewpoints and ability to give everyone a platform to express their opinion without judgment in a safe manner becomes really, really important to the advancement and success of the company.
Okay, one more question, and this question I have to ask Mr. Tiwari there. Mr. Tiwari, and of course I'll come to you, Mr. Rai, as well. I wanted to ask about some of the challenges that workforce transformation faces in your operations term. Mr. Tiwari, if you can first go, and I'll come to Mr. Rai after.
Yeah, so, see, some of the challenges was during this transition. Few of them were not ready to accept those new way of sitting in the meeting. They don't know how to conduct meeting, how to sit in the meeting properly, how to answer to the questions. There were many people who believed to talk in sidelines during the physical presence in the meeting. So that sideline business was not there. Actually, that has gone. So few of them start feeling uncomfortable attending those meetings. Also, few of the people, few of the person, they feel that this kind of meeting, their voices may not be heard properly. They don't know what is the reaction of the other people, because in physical meetings they used to have good reactions, and people find this is too mechanical actually. So that was one of the challenge we had to overcome. We have to make people understand that this is the order of the day. We have to follow the technology. Technology is there to help us. To some people, it was to track them. Basically, they start feeling that we are being tracked all the time. Whenever there is a mail, there is a meeting invitation, and then in that process, many people start feeling that these meetings are basically a waste of time, because they are being invited all the time in all the meetings, because it is very easy to invite people. So unwanted people, unrequired people, not required people also been invited, and then in some of the cases we end up and having no decision in the meeting because there was very large group. The point number 3 was the other challenge was to record your discontent, record your non-agreement, because in earlier in physical meetings people used to talk on sidelines, people go outside and record their non-agreement. They don't want to record their non-agreement on an open forum. So they used to go during lunchtime or during the free time. They come to us, they talk to us, boss, this is not good, that is not going to happen. They start feeling that this group in this group they will be exposed, or they will not be taken very positively when there is a disagreement. So the voice of disagreement, we have found that voice of disagreement has really come down. That is really a worrisome case in case of a democratic setup, and in case of an open kind of atmosphere. The disengagement, disagreement, and difference of opinion is very important, very productive sometimes. And so that was a big challenge to us, and still we are facing this challenge. We are trying to overcome this challenge by talking to them after meeting, or prior to meeting, talking to them, get their feel about it, about the subject, or giving them subject one day in advance, inviting their views about it, one to one during one-to-one in mail communications and all. So we saw a little bit improvement, but these are a few challenges actually.
Okay. One last question to Mr. Rai. The man and the chain challenge as an impediment to change. How have you addressed that problem, that that typical human habit of resisting change, if not trying to stop it? You're on mute, Mr. Rai.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So the COVID was so sudden and immediate that nobody was aware what is happening and what is going to happen in next hour or next day. So things were getting evolved every day, new things were coming. And people were so anxious that whatever was being told during that period, I think most of the people were willing to follow, and they were ready for the change. That was the phenomena we could see. Yes, there was a fear. People were really afraid because they were not knowing what is going to happen, how it will impact to their health, their family. So to that extent, we always try to assure them that company is there with them. Whatever may happen, we will be standing with the individual employees, and we did that. We demonstrated that. So with that demonstration, all the people were ready to follow whatever they were being told, whether it is adopting to technology, attending to their work, or going extra mile and delivering, even if somebody is not there. Doing the job of second person, third person was also possible during those periods. And they were seeing that it is a real challenge for the business, for the institution. So people were definitely extra flexible than what normally we see in our day-to-day life. That was the situation which we faced, and probably we could manage to make them like that because of the proactive action of the company, that whatever happens, the company is there with the employees, and we will be helping them to the maximum possible extent. So that's how we could manage this.
Okay, get the point. So very interesting conversation. Look at the number of times technology was mentioned, and some of the other issues were mentioned. Some of the key words which I referred to, there were only some of them that they were referred to during the conversation. So clearly, I would like to, after hearing the expert, like to believe that technology is going to have a bigger role in all our lives and all your lives, because you are the people who are running plants and running large corporations. And I'll get to hopefully hear more about that in the days ahead. Dragana, if I can request you for a few words at the end as concluding remarks, please.
Thank you. It's an exciting time. It's a scary time. I think everyone is going through slow emotions and wondering about what the future will bring. I mean, we're still on that roller coaster of, potential closures and potential reinfections and mutations of the virus. But the goal, I think, if anything, the last 2 years have shown resilience, and manufacturing is probably one of the most difficult sectors to manage through this transition, given the need for frontliners to be right there, disruption of supply chain, and the fact that your companies have thrived. I think that's a great sign that the future ahead of you is bright. And to just echo some of the words here, especially for Mr. Kapur, about having the vision and having the roadmap to achieve that vision, and having the courage, and not being afraid to fail. I think those are some of the really key things to abide by, and have faith, and just really take it one step at a time, keeping the eye on the end goal.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for taking out the time. Wonderful speaking to you. And I hope you can join us again when we bring up an important topic for you with the experts on the economic times. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.